You're listening to the Karmic Mirror podcast, where we explore the wisdom tucked within the layers of the self-help world.
Together, we bridge the gap between esoteric teachings and practical tools for everyday life, with self-love and personal growth at the heart of each conversation.
Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you.
Welcome back to this episode of Karmic Mirror. Today we're joined by the radiant and deeply rooted Shanti. As the visionary creatrix behind Womb Shanti, she bridges the mystical and the tangible, guiding women to reclaim their womb wisdom, integrate their shadows, and remember their inherent sovereignty. In today's conversation, we're going to explore that sacred dance between the light and the shadow, and how true healing often begins when we dare to look within. Throughout this conversation, we'll reframe self-care, spiritual healing, not as fixes, but as a living invitation calling us towards expansion, wholeness, self-worth, and just, I would say, badass feminine energy, because that's what you really bring to the table. Welcome, my love.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you too. And to just kind of, this is perfect season with, Scorpio coming into the fold, and we're doing this in the evening, and I just thrive in the shadows. It's my area. I feel super comfortable. So ready and open.
Yeah. Hi, Michelle.
Hello. Let's get into it because I already want to. There's so many little things that I've heard you say that I'm like, oh, I want to know more.
Michelle had said we were just talking about topics, Shanti, and then we were like, what's the theme though? November. And I was kind of saying October is to witches, is November is to what? And then I was like, oh my goodness, shadows and Shanti. And we have the conversation coming up. So for everyone who is interested how Shanti got on our radar, I'll make a short story is that I've talked about the Womb Wisdom Spa community and Steph and women's circles, but that is how Shanti got on my radar initially, was through these women's circle. And then she was one of the facilitators on the Triple Moon Goddess Retreat, which we'll plug towards the end and have continued to plug with some of our previous healers. So let's dive into some of these energies, Shanti. We like to start with the top three
Yeah,
of
your
astrology.
Okay. So I do know I am a Cancer moon, Cancer sun, rising Aquarius. And it's really interesting because you would think with so much Cancer energy, even though my birthday's at the end of a Cancer season, right before Leo season begins, that I would be this, like, I guess, overtly emotional person and like all in my feelings all the time. And I think generally speaking, most people when they meet me, they're like so baffled at that because they don't meet the Cancer. They're either meeting this Aquarius energy or like the bit of Leo energy that I have. So they're just like, wait a minute, you're a Cancer and you have Cancer everywhere? And I'm like, yeah, I know, go figure. But what I think what it does for me and where it brings the balance is that it allows me to be introspective, right? Because an Aquarius is so logical, so theoretical, and compartmentalize a lot of things. And then Cancer energy allows me to be a little bit more in tuned and to look deeper, like the waters. And that's how I see shadow. Right? When we look at shadow work, we're not looking necessarily at the surface of our consciousness. We're looking at the subconsciousness as such a deeper layer of energy where oftentimes we are most fearful to really look at the mirror. Because why? At the other end is ourself, is our very own reflection. And that requires accountability. And we are in a society, I feel, that is very quick to point the finger at, you did this to me. And not realizing that, yes, people do harm others, but there's a level of accountability for how you have allowed that harm to even take place. And I'm a big believer that like attracts like. So oftentimes when we attract toxic individuals, it's because we have a level of toxicity within ourselves as well.
Shanti, you are speaking my language because sometimes I think I would say that tough love approach feels, and maybe that's like just an old school term for it, but when you say words like accountability and being willing to look at your own toxic behaviors, to me, that's like a romance song because because it's so real and it's on one end, I think about all of the compassion that it takes to work with people on this in with shadow as the vehicle for all of the change or the growth that they want to happen. It takes a lot of compassion and it does when you talk about the cancer rising and the cancer of it all. First of all, I'm jumping all over the place, but before we hit record, I think Ali said like, oh, are you putting out fires? And you said, I'm always putting out fires. And I was like, oh, how water is a sign of you and how cancer sign to be the one that's like, yep, I'm here. Like you said, one of the first things you said, do you know, if there's like family or anybody that needs me, I'm like there to like put out the fire or whatever it is, which feels so real. I love also you said like, I thrive in the dark. Which I was like, oh yeah, of course, Cancer, moon, the
Yes,
moon.
very much so.
I
So it
love
shows,
all of that.
yeah, so it shows up in such an interesting way versus what I think the average person thinks, right? Because I think Cancerians have been noted to be someone that's like overtly emotional, always like, I don't want to say always crying, but this sense of like, yes, there's a level of mothering, but I think that sometimes it's been taken a little bit too far on the left side of the context, right? Like, and someone who's just always doting. And I don't know, I've like, it's been phrased to me like a leave it to beaver kind of mom, right?
Mm.
And I don't necessarily see it in those natures. I see, especially for myself, which I will speak in that level, is mothering to me is, very much holding a person accountable. Like, okay, I'm gonna listen to what you have to say, but at the same time, where did you play a role in this? And asking those tough questions and not necessarily giving you the answers either, because the whole point is for you to get to those answers and being comfortable in the darkness. Like, I'm okay being alone. I'm okay walking in the dark through things that average persons do not feel comfortable. Like, I love the cemetery. I think it's such a beautiful artwork. And they speak in so many different ways, and to have that relationship between life and death. And if we think about it, that's exactly what shadow work is a relationship between life and death. It is the
Mm.
current life and the transformation, right? That transition is the death of an aspect within you in order to come about from the other end in a new state of life. So it's the life, death, rebirth cycle. I think that's what I enjoy the most about shadow work and pushing people to get uncomfortable and being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, right? So it's like, and it's kind of like an anomaly in that sense.
I think from a healer aspect, as someone who's been on the receiving end of your gifts, you create that safe space to be in the shadows as a healer, as someone in your presence. That's how I felt. You do have this very bold, and I remember meeting you like in circles and just I knew it was my shit. Like, whoa, this is some powerful. I don't know quite know what to think about Shanti because she's got some power to her, and then you just see this effortless energy when you're around you of just being able to receive that from you, if that makes sense, in a healing space. And also the fact that you quite literally work with your hands with womb massages. And even
Uh-huh.
I know one morning when I was having a hard time just coming over and just, the Reiki and that work feels very Cancer in your moon, also the body and
Hmm.
all of that.
Shanti, where did this begin in terms of your ability, maybe natural gift or knack for being able to balance the accountability of holding people accountable through their shadow, through these incredibly, like, arguably the areas of our life that we, one, are either unconscious, we don't even know that we're living out from this space, or are so freaking terrified to even look at it because that means we have to look at, not just the surface level things that we can pick apart about ourselves that we don't like. No, this is like the deeper layers of the things that we came here to literally transform through trials and maybe through
Hmm.
life experiences. So where do you think that natural kind of ability to, and also interest. Like you seem like not just that it comes naturally to you, but that this is an area that you're like, no, I'm in it. Like I know your profile for human design and we can get there, but I want to know where you first started to pick up on this is like this is something I'm here to be a part of and support people through.
I think it was always within me. Reflecting back on stories that family members have shared with me about like my behavior and attitude as like through a 2 year old 1 year old in diapers, and then reflecting back on like pictures and just little anecdotes. I think it was always there, but I didn't know what to make of it or how to deal with it. And then obviously going through adolescence and then adulthood, and adulthood kind of like sporadic because you're in your 20s. I still think you're not an adult, especially now reflecting to who I was then. There came a point where I lost it. I got detached from it and started to adhere to what others wanted, whether it was societal, whether it was culturally, whether it was friends and etc., and even partners. And then it came into like a full front, like smack me across the face, really when I realized that I had a pattern, and my last three serious relationships were very toxic. And when I say toxic, this is like it gradually led to all levels of abuse, from emotional to mental to physical to spiritual. And in my last relationship, I was really at a point where I knew something needed to change, but I just didn't know how to. And I felt responsible in a way of that if I walked away, I was going to be making a lot of people disappointed. So I really began to tap into just like energies around me, seeking some sort of balance and wanting for it to just kind of like happen in a organic way where all parties involved couldn't run away from the truth. So
Mm-hmm.
inadvertently holding everyone accountable, including myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in that same ask, it very much unfolded like that. But in that process, it's how I started to further along a journey in my spirituality that had began in college, but that I wasn't really certain on how to approach. And because at the time I wasn't confident to have these conversations or to display it, it was somewhat of a taboo. And so that spirituality was tapping into my African lineage and understanding all that encompasses what that is. So I, having been raised as a Roman Catholic with parents who are not of the denomination in any way, shape, or form, but are Christians, I was just like, how do I explore this? And this is a faith, not a religion for me, but a faith, a spirituality that feels the truest. And one thing that I can also know is that I actually practice and study all sorts of religion, like from Buddhism and being at a monastery to Hinduism to Islam. Like I've sat with elders, spoke with them, and while they were beautiful, they never felt real. They didn't feel real within my being,
Mm-hmm.
So in that journey, and then moving forward to present time, or at that time in this toxic relationship, I knew I wanted to strengthen that relationship and really kind of shed that skin of like fear. And so I kind of just like with a blind, like closed my eyes and just dived in. It was also the thing that I was asking to save me in a way. And then it just started to appear.
Shanti,
So I,
what's the story with wasn't there something you were invited to an event and there was a healer there who gave you a message as well?
oh,
Uh,
I've had several of those. Yeah.
okay, not to, you can continue with the journey, but I was wondering where that was in regards to all of this
So,
also.
yeah, so this all happened kind of like over the course of time, where it began very slowly as like me just being trying to understand what the practice is and getting introduced to different things. And I would always get some message would always come through. And this is on the African side, because then I have a whole nother story with my indigenous side too. And messages will always come through that I needed to get initiated, that that path of madrina, right, of godmother, of a guider, of a leader was going to be necessary. And I would always go like, yeah, 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 no, I don't know what you're talking about, not happening. And so fast forward, I go through trials and tribulations, even in my spiritual practice and at conflicts with my partner, right? So I think that was like another signal to let you know, hey, this isn't working out, that I finally got to a point where I just pretty much said, fuck it. Like, I don't care if it bothers you, if it makes you uncomfortable. I don't care who knows, who doesn't know, whether my parents are going to have some form of a comment or I don't know, be disapproval, whatever that is, it doesn't matter. And so I committed to it 100% and took a year before going to Nigeria and getting initiated. And that began that spiritual path. But I also knew and recognized that that is not my only lineage and that I needed to also and wanted and felt a craving and a calling from my indigenous side. And so then that started to appear. And so in this whole method of me trying to find a way out of this relationship in the most PC way possible without offending anyone, of walking away from an 8-year relationship, I get led down the path of my spirituality. My elders are coming forward and showing up and showing me the way. Next thing I know, I'm surrounded by a community that is just releasing this information of awakening. And so, in that same context, the relationship breaks up. It ends. And it ends in the most, I like to think, most beautiful way, because it really was a situation that no one could run away from it. There was no way for any one person to deny the truth. Everything happened in a very confrontational way. But what I like to say that I am most proud of is that when everything happened, I was as still as possible. And I just stood there and watched and said, okay, this is what I called in. Therefore, I have to listen. And in the coming months and actually even years, because it has been now 3 going on 4 years since that relationship has ended, and it was a 8-year relationship, and I still find myself peeling back the layers of that and everything else that led up to that, including down my relationship with my parents, particularly with my father, right? And my parents are still married and I love my parents, but we inherit things also from them. So through that practice and through that journey and through that experience is how I began to untap the realization that this desire and this need and this like understanding of the shadow and why I thrive in it and why it's so embedded in my own blood. While others were telling me in these events and these gatherings, it was one of those things like I was still detached from it. But now that I'm experiencing it and now that I'm putting myself like fully putting myself through it, it was that awakening where I could feel it in my being, like through coursing through my blood. And why, like when I speak about it, I get lit up because to me it's like there's no other there's no other thing I would rather be doing than this.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I know that it is the space that I was meant to hold, and also to say that I've done and there's nothing wrong with the love and light side of this work, and I've done I held space in that, but I always felt like a fraud. I had the imposter syndrome in there because something wasn't connected for me. And I realized that while I can hold space in those areas, I truthfully 100% thrive in the uncomfortable, the murky waters, in the swamps of our souls, and creating a space where, yeah, let's turn off all the lights.
Yeah, yeah.
And let's talk to the boogeyman, i.e.,
I'm
you.
I'm giggling as you're saying this, Shanti, because the vision I'm having in my head is at the Triple Moon Goddess retreat and the sweat lodge. And when I was energetically purging, which for me is through the mouth, but Shanti is literally the one. She gets up, like walks me out of the sweat lodge, and we are holding hands underneath the shower together, and she's doing Reiki on me. So that is when you're talking about those gifts, it's crazy. it's not crazy, but to me, I could just see that is the gift and the healing is you were so aware of all of the women and those needs. And you know, I'll say as well as the other facilitators, you all brought your gifts, but you know yourself so well, and I think that's what allows you to be that type of healer, which is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing so much of that. Like there was a lot in there that was there were so many interconnected threads of, one, I love hearing more about your lineage and your cultural background. And I'm really, really curious to hear about the messages that you were receiving from your ancestors and from your lineage in your roots in Nigeria. And I want to hear more about your indigenous background as well. But I also want to, there's a lot of places I want to go with you, but let's just tackle the list here. I want to hear a little bit about the messages. What was that like? Where is it? Yeah, take us there.
I mean, they were beautiful. At moments, they were a little like scary because you're awakening this power and you're just like, and then, you go to the clinical terminologies. Oh my God, maybe I'm schizophrenia. Maybe I have multiple personalities. Like something is not right here. No one else is hearing these voices. What?
Mm,
So once those thoughts crossed my mind, I was quick to shut them down. And the conversations that I was having, it was very interesting. They happened very sporadically, but they lingered with me. So there would be times when I would get my messages in dreams, very, very, very extremely vivid dreams and this is how I knew that I needed to carry both energies from my African and my indigenous line before an elder even told me. I had a dream where I was at my father's hometown, and my dad grew up on a beach, and it's one of my favorite places in the world because there's no hotels, there's no houses. It is as wild and as crazy as it's ever been. It just kind of brings me back to just thinking about what was life back in those time frames, and you know when it was just populated by indigenous people that used canoes up and down the river into the ocean. And I remember standing there and I was facing my family. So we were on a family trip, and this is like my father's side of the family are very, very Christian. I mean, like next level evangelicals, where they teased me for wanting to play with my cousins, but I would always turn around and say, well, it's not my fault you birthed boys. Who else am I supposed to play with, right? And then the guys, they're all grown up, but they still hold a lot of those ideologies where women are supposed to play these certain roles and men other roles. And I can remember being on the beach, and it was right at the cross path of where the river meets the ocean. And I'm standing on one side of that bend. They're all standing on the opposite side of that bend. And somehow, like, I remember crossing it, leaving them behind. And then the next thing I know, I turn around and it's like it's me, but it's not me. And there's this glow. And then the next thing I know, I felt two warm hands on either shoulders, and there were two women. One is Oshun, the goddess of fertility in African Yoruba tradition. And then the other was Atabe, which is the indigenous mother of fertility. And basically, it's our version of Pachamama, so to speak, right? Or
mm,
Mother Gaia. And they're both standing behind me, and they simultaneously are speaking through me. So my mouth is moving, but it's not my voice. It's their voices in unison. And it was calling to my family a reclamation of recalling back their line and
mm,
reclaiming that. And I can see my family kind of like in distaste or like shunning away. And as they did that, it was as if a light came out and then they all went blind. And that was like kind of like their, I guess, punishment for not
mm,
embracing it. And I woke up from that dream holding on to that dream. And soon after, I, without saying a word, met with one of my elders, who has transitioned. And we were doing some work, and he was teaching me about body work, and then, guiding me through my relationship with tobacco. And in one of our sessions, I don't know. He would always recognize that he would always see my African elders very much present and very much asking him for asking him, or more I should rather say telling him that he needed to ask permission to do any work on me, even just to read my energy. Like he needed to get their permission. And in that last session, right before I did my spirit walk, they both appeared and they both told him she is to hold both lines and both practices. And he then shared it with me, and I remember laughing. And he was like, "Why are you laughing?" And then I shared with him the story, and I was like, "Oh, so you already knew?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I kind of did." And then that's where and I kept it going, and I have kept it going, giving respect and homage to the two, and understanding and the respect to when they want one wants to take the lead over the other. I've had the experience, and especially in the work that I do with women and their wombs, where I'll sit at home, I will plan out their session, I will plan out the herbs that I'm going to be introducing and bringing into the fold. I'll go to my apothecary, and a whole nother conversation is being had with me on what herbs I need to use. And part of my research and study has always been about looking at herbs from a spiritual component and understanding what herb is aligned to what orisha and those energies, and how do you use that energy to bring forth the balance between the physical and the spiritual. And so they would show up. Like I would have a full conversation with like Yemaya, and she's, not necessarily the Orisha that showed up during my initiation or that walks with me on a day-to-day basis. I would have a full conversation with Obatala, and he would say what he wanted, and I'm like, okay, well, relax. I'm gonna do what you tell me. And then there's been moments while I'm in a session with someone, and all of a sudden, Atabe would show up, and or my indigenous elders would show up, and my grandfather tobacco would be like, you need to use me. Like nothing else is gonna work here except for me being present. And so I would have to switch gears. So it was kind of like I would prepare, but then I had to always make sure I was walking with like a plethora of other things around me, because I never knew who else was going to show up because of the ancestral line and guardians that the client had. I could tap into it occasionally from a distance, but it would be more potent when I'm around them and in closer proximity. So then that would happen. And then I would get messages, and then it would be interesting because then afterwards they would tell me about a dream that they had prior to our session or a vision that they had during our session. And it's directly tied into the herbs without me telling them the herbs, but connected to the herbs that I selected for their session. And which is interesting because then I would get people say like, I would like a session like so and so. And I'm like, nope, can't do that. Like I can't tell you what's gonna happen. It's just what's gonna happen.
Yes.
And so that's how those things would happen. And then I would meet with my elders, my Nigerian elders, and other elders within the community of Isheshe. And yeah, I would get random. I would say random because they would be unexpected, but not random in the sense that like I didn't need to hear them. And it would be messages from as far as, how to ensure not to carry the very energies that I pull for others. Because my sessions would be that, because I have that ability where I actually pull and then I walk around with those energies, and then they do harm onto my body. And it's happened one too many times, which is why I have a full method of what I do before and after a session. But I would have things like that would happen. They would tell me like things that I would need to have to carry with me, additional things. I had this one interaction with an elder that I've never to this day physically met, but we're in the same community through social media. And I had commented on something, and he saw my picture, and he was like, I need to speak with you. And I was like, okay. And next thing I know, he just asked me for my birthday. And he goes, can I get your address? I need to send you something. And I'm always weary about that. But I was like, okay.
Yeah, just what do you mean? Giving somebody your address,
Yeah.
social,
Right.
and birth name?
But I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
something in my soul said do it. So I did. Next thing I know, I received this fashion pouch that I wear around my neck, and he supplied me with all the elements that I needed to do and gave me, like, do this when you feel called to. And I did it by the trees and water. So because I always need to be by land and water. And but what was the most interesting component about it is the way he fashioned it. In the front, he had put the African lion, and in the back, he had put the Maori hook.
Wow.
Now, this man did not know that I've been more than once to Africa, and then the fact that it was an African lion. And then my hair, when it's out and curly, I always got reference that I look like the lion, or they would be like, oh, the lion is out. So I thought that was really interesting. And then with the Maori hook, it's the warrior hook. So aside from like the warrior energy, I have been to New Zealand and I have shared space with the Maori culture. And interesting enough, around that time, I kept saying, I need to go back. I need to connect to that indigenous warrior. But it was just like more like me to my friends. And it was around the time where I was also connecting to my own indigenous. So I just wanted to build a larger, wider community, not just within the Taino community, but just across the plains. So for him to have fashioned it that way, I was left speechless. And that only told me how much like our guides and our spirit are speaking, and they'll speak in ways with people that sometimes we don't need to have a long relationship with. They're just here to really just give us a little nugget, and at that moment may not make sense, but down the road it does, which is very similar to like the work that I do, especially around shadow work, because I'm always like, this is just a fruit of nugget. Save it, write it down the road, or at the end of this is going to show up again, and you're going to understand why or when or how to use that information.
Yeah. That reminds me of, you said the first messages you were hearing were about being initiated. And it
Mm-hmm.
made me think of, all that Cancer placement in your chart. And Cancer is a cardinal sign. It's here to initiate us into summer. And and there's something really interesting about that and about what you said about your sessions too, of dropping, this is just a nugget. Like you're here to initiate, and when you initiate, you don't always have the full picture. You just have to
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a real deep level of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And in your kids, it sounds like, right, like that trust in yourself to be able to look at the shadow, look at the toxic patterns and hold yourself through them with like the accountability and the love and the nurturing, all of it. And also to be able to, yeah, to just hold that space for other people to move them through, co-collaborators and everything that we can't see, trusting again more of what's not tangible on this earth. It's super, super rich, all of what you're sharing, and I love it. I also love the clear calling. And I want to talk about Womb Shanti because Atabe, they're both fertility goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
When you got that, when you think back on that dream, was it clear that you were going to be working with womb space so clearly in that space, or how did that come about? I'm so curious because it's clear there's like this beautiful golden thread. And oh, there's so much, Shanti. This is really beautiful. I keep thinking also about just, you said earlier, so I don't want to throw too many things out there, but even just when you mentioned the Roman Catholic and your family and being super, super devout in Christianity or Catholicism, and also just your clear path to really reclaim your heritage and all of the power.
So interesting enough, it came really from my own practice. It wasn't something that I sought out to do in the sense of like, oh, I want to be a doula, right? Or I want to do this. It was me trying to find a way to heal my body and what I was going through as I was getting out of this relationship that I was in, because I was also suffering from unbalanced hormones, and my skin developed this odd rash where I was leaving my skin behind. So kind of like I was a snake.
Yeah.
I had biopsies done, and everything came back like unknown. And I was just like, huh, tell me something I don't know. Yeah, I am weird or whatever you want to call it, right? So in that process of like asking to get out of this on a spiritual level and then finding a healing method to heal my own physical body because Western medicine wasn't healing that. I started to really unravel this layer of understanding that healing doesn't have one rubric and one mythology, that there's many ways to approach it, and it is understanding that there is not a one size fits all. And so it may look like some folks may have to go through Western medicine. It may look like some folks need to go through Western medicine combined with holistic natural medicine. And then there's some who are going to thrive in solely holistic medicine. In my case, that's where I thrived for my physical being. So in understanding that, I knew I wanted to share. So here I have these two components, these two amazing women energy, feminine energy, who are standing behind me and who are really talking about reclamation, right? Reclaiming our spiritual being. And then them talking to me through my healing of my physical needs. And from there developed a sense of I need to share it forward. I can't keep this within me because that's not fair. And it was almost as if this is what I owed the very two goddesses that stood behind me, right? Because that's what they were sort of, I guess, preaching in that dream, like come back to the natural ways. And those that didn't were blinded. Right. So interesting enough, when I started Womb Shanti, I really did start it from a perspective of a more physical, medicinal lens. And so I went down the rabbit hole with herbalism, homeopathy. Then I started looking and studying iridology with one of my elders and beautiful guides and friend, beautiful mentor that currently now lives in Greece, but she's amazing. And I started to look at it from that perspective, from that wanting to heal women to give them autonomy. And so when I started getting into this realm, I was actually showing up to like gynecologist appointments as a womb doula. And that was kind of like weird because people were like, a womb doula? What is that? Because they've heard doula, right? But they're like, a womb doula? And I was like, yeah, I'm an advocate for her womb because she's not going to have procedures or an examination without her knowledge. So it was all about reclaiming that. Like, even down to, are you okay to allow the doctor? Like, I gave my clients the ability to say, do you want the doctor to insert the spectrum in you, or do you want to do it yourself and then invite the doctor to look when you're ready? And that would change the dynamics of the experience for women. Being in spaces where women were like that they've never even looked at their yoni before, and they were reaching already wise woman age. And then also looking at my very own mother, who never spoke to my sister and I about any of the procedures that she was getting done when we were little. We just knew we were going to the Dominican Republic for her to have an operation. Little did we know she pretty much had a hysterectomy. She had endometriosis, and my sister who now has that, and so there was just like a lot of things that like we weren't like we had to learn because either one of us was experiencing, and then now that my sister has two daughters, she has those conversations, and so it took that, and also like my own interest of wanting to understand my own historical lineage as well, like just seeing patterns of things, that I felt that it was necessary to give women that voice and that strength to know that they're not alone. From there, it's where I then started to shift a little bit of gear, or I don't want to say necessarily shift, but rather combining the work in a collective and the shadow work. Because as I was studying the physical, I was understanding and realizing that the ailments that we develop, endometriosis, fibroids, PCOS, yeast infections, BV, they don't just come about because of a one time. Yes, they do have a connection with like sex and, transmission, but there's something more to it, right? And even with the person who may have given it to you, or that over time, because of age, develop, there's always another component to it, whether it is our own experiences or our ancestral line. But then there's the emotional component, because everything is connected to an emotion, right? So whether it's anger, fear, or grief, resentment, and so on, creating this imbalancement within our own very body. And when you start to look at such ailments with the emotional component and understanding, like, oh, I'm actually not okay. Like, I'm not fine. I'm actually really angry. And then there's layers to anger because then there's rage and untapping and letting that go. And when you start to have those breakthroughs, it's when you start to see, oh my God, I'm having a breakthrough in my physical. And I can even use myself as a perfect example of that. It wasn't until I started to tap into my own physical rage that I started to heal my physical body, and the unknown, weird sort of rash that I developed that was running all through my back, over my breast, down my arms, where I was shedding skin, and I felt like I was literally on fire. I couldn't even open my eyes at times. So when you're having that experience and you're like, but I'm not angry, when in reality, I was beyond angry. I was and it wasn't until I started to tap into that and started to express it and let it out in a way that I felt it was safe that my body started to find its rhythm. And then I started to work also with my organs, such as my liver. And so when I started to calm and heal my liver, my entire body found its harmony. And now when if I have a flare up of any sort, which I don't ever have them in my back or anyone, but anywhere in the body, like that's the first thing I start thinking of. Okay, is, oh, wait, I'm gassy. So what am I holding on to? What do I need to sit with? What emotion am I not processing? And the next thing I know, it kind of shifts. And then I'm also able to find that the food that I'm taking in, right? There's a different appreciation. My body is able to take in the nourishment the way that I need to. And then all of a sudden, I'm no longer gassy, or I'm no longer this, or I'm no longer that. My period is functioning normal. It's for 5 days, it's coming on time, so you start to see that everything is in sync. And so I wanted to teach that to women moving forward. And I wanted them to understand it from those pole planes. And so that's where this dark shadow work came into the fold. And then I used a very shadow program that I crafted for myself and went through for a lot longer of a duration. I did it for 2 years. And I only take women through a 12-week program. So I took them, so I basically combined the 2 years of me, doing Kundalini it was like a 2 year straight, 40 days to 60-day Kriyas, detoxing with food, and everything else that I was doing for me to be able to say, okay, this is the balance. And this is how I was able to do the analysis of, like, this relationship, yes, it was toxic, but I contributed to it. Whether it was through my silence, it was through not, turning the other cheek, or very much me compartmentalizing myself, because this person knew one version of me, my friend, my closest dearest friends knew another, my work environment knew another, so everyone knew a different version of me. So it came down to, who am I? Because you could be all these different people, but why not share all of it at all times? Why hold off? And so, yeah, that's how it all came together. And in that same process, I started to walk women through shadow program, and I started to see their own revelation and their own strength come forward, where women were tapping into a part of themselves that they had suppressed so far down that they didn't even know. And it took them to traveling to their former homeland to confront the very location and people who traumatized them when they were 8 years old, or to have the uncomfortable conversation with a family member, or acknowledge, and just acknowledging that there's still a layer of it that they still have to walk through, because this isn't over just because you do one program and one time shadow work. It's something that you have to constantly be open to healing from, so that you can find a resolution in a level of, I recognize that. That's a red flag. No, thank you.
Yeah. The 1-3 profile of it all, Shanti, just this, you can tell those areas and the generatorness of it all, that, this space and your own healing, it was that one line. And I think you said it, even I went down a rabbit hole, right? And then like just going down to the depths of learning about all of the things. And then the three line of it all of experiencing it and just really how that's in your design. I mean, you literally just said, it took 2 years and then I put it into a 12-week program. And then I also know from my exposure to you and our experience that you are continuing in your work. You do things, you learn, you evolve, and that's very that three line as well, which is beautiful. And I think what is lovely about what you bring to the collective is that piece of just the physicality of what can take place in that
Mhm.
healing. And I think in obviously I've had energy move and I'm calling my friend thinking my appendix is going to explode and I am dying. And that's three line of me too. I have to experience it, but we're not taught these things. And so I
Mhm.
really appreciate healers in your space because I do know when, I was going and doing healing work with you all, you definitely were like, if you get chills, if you get hot flashes, if you are purging the energy, we talked about all of that all throughout the journey. And yeah, I think it's beautiful to have healers like you because we're so often to run to those quick fixes.
Mhm.
And yeah, sometimes it just is. When I had like a big shock to my system, I was purging, I was getting hives, and I had no idea where it was just physically breaking out. And then after a couple of days, it just left and was
Mhm.
gone. And when you start to experience it, so I think that's so beautiful. Michelle, what is lighting you up or what comes up for you?
No, there's just a lot of really there we didn't go over your human design, Shanti, but yeah, I mean, I know, so if it's okay, I'll just say you're a generator.
Mhm.
And as Ali mentioned, you're a 1-3 profile. And I know that you are also an emotional authority, which I really love when you said, like, yeah, cancers are supposed to be overly emotional and all of this. And yes, and also there's just so much more depth to all of us, right? To all and we embody all of the zodiac. But I think having Cancer as a rising, Cancer as your sun as well, and having that emotional authority and also working in check, like all of these point to, it's almost the emotional authorities are totally here to learn wisdom of the emotions and how to really, really like show us the way of what it means to be comfortable in all the full spectrum of emotions. And it's so intriguing to talk to you and hear a little bit more about, and just get to kind of see how it plays out almost, or at least my perception of it. And the 1-3 profile is like, I think of the 1-3 profile as like the true Sherlock Holmes, or like the whodunit, like the Agatha Christie's, because the one is like super, it's the investigator, right? So you build confidence through knowledge and through understanding, and you're here to have that. But the three line is the trial and error. And so everything that you've said, the words that resonate the most for me when I am thinking about you, and this is the first time we've ever spoken, is like true embodied wisdom,
Mhm.
because you have to like live it and feel it. And whether you knew 1-3 or not, who cares? You are doing it in a way that, I'm looking at our outline and it says dark shadow. Like we're not talking just, shadow work. Like look at all of that. Like I think you're like, I am here for the dark shadow, like the things
Mhm.
that maybe most people in their lifetime will never get to come close face to face with. Most people will continue living a karmic loop through lifetimes until they get to the point where they can run no more
Mhm.
from the deep dark shadow that is like, I want to come through and I want to breathe and move and I want to like ascend and move forward. And I also think it's so important to just um, thank you for being a real um, advocate for women. When you talk about going into gynecology appointments or sitting with women and um, showing them that it's one thing to talk about having body autonomy. We can say it, we can even live it in many, many ways. But the world around us, gynecology appointments as a beautiful example, and the Western medical system, I don't feel that my best interests are always represented. And that's really challenging because, that's not the way that most people, that's not, for generations before us, not many generations, but for a
Mhm.
couple generations, the ones in the Western culture, anyways, that have really stuck are a very patriarchal system. And they do not, we don't go to a doctor's appointment and think that we have a right to be fully autonomous in our body. And as women, that's like on 30 times that experience because it's built into our bodies, our DNA, and also, or I mean, our energetic DNA and our
Mm-hmm.
energetic ancestral patterns and so, so much. All of those things that we don't even know that we're carrying from women before us in our family of not really. So I think it's just that's something I've never heard before. I've never ever heard anyone talk about, going into that type of appointment and just having someone advocate for them that you have a right to, you may not have ever met this doctor. Maybe you just met them and all of a sudden they're like, in our most, our crystal palace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a organ. It's not just, there's so much more there. And so I really thank you for any woman that you've worked with, but I think anyone that listens to this conversation and maybe even again, like plants the seed, that initiating energy that you're
Mm-hmm.
here to represent in so many ways. And even if it just lightly plants a seed of, oh, I can ask questions, I can be more curious about what do I have a say in here, which is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Really thought that was so lovely and hearing that. But yeah, that embodied wisdom is so real. And I think it takes someone being able to look at that deep, deep, dark shadow to fully, like you said earlier, like I did love and light and it wasn't, I felt like an imposter. And I'm just a big, I really believe that to fully embody love and light, you cannot do that without embodying your dark because they go together and
Yeah.
they should, interplay in every way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things is too for me is that every year that I put the Dark Shadow program together, I literally go through it with the women who go sign up for the program. And what I mean I go through it is my expectation of you as a participant is to hold a meditation daily. I'm holding that daily.
Mm-hmm.
Ali can attest to that I'm very big on like, oh, we're gonna do something for 40 days, let's go. And I will be a check-in person and I will constantly, so I live because I want them to know that because I'm an advocate that the work is never done. I need to also embody that. And that's why every year that I put this program together, I go through it with the women. I experience what they're experiencing. It also allows me to bridge that connection with them that before they even tell me something, I can sense it. And then the next class together kind of shifts a little bit on the nature of what I'm picking up that is the overarching sentiment that I can be reaching. But so yeah, so in light of like that embodiment, like for me it's super important. And then also with like just showing up for the appointments because I've been there where I've had female to male doctors where they were like super rough and like, hello, what are you doing? What's going on here? And then, where it is gone from the spectrum of like those who like walk you through every little step before they do it. And then those that just don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And it could be scary and it could be daunting. And then you're here looking at this person who inadvertently is judging you somewhat, right? As they're checking you in your most vulnerable state. And so for me, it was really important to like take away if I can help another woman not have to go through that experience that I went through and just be a little bit more confident and comfortable to speak up whether I am or not present, but know that they have that right to say this, to ask, this is my ex, the same way that we walk into a relationship with a friendship or a boyfriend or a partner. My expectation is communication.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you do that with your doctors? Why can't you
Yeah,
just say, I
yeah.
want communication? Tell me every little thing you're going to do it before you do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and most people, I don't think even do that in relationship.
Well,
We
yes, that is
wait,
very true.
right? We wait. It's, when that's a whole other path of, what we choose in partners,
Mm-hmm.
the wounds that we are still uh maybe unconscious to or
Mm-hmm.
healing. And so you run this dark shadow program. What is it? Is it something that you run yearly?
So it's called the Womb Alchemy,
Well,
and it
okay. Yes.
is
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. I've
it's
seen
called
it
the
on your Instagram now that
yeah.
now I remember the words. Yes.
So it's the womb alchemy, the dark feminine right, and it's
Mm,
embodying that dark feminine within ourselves. And it runs every year around the winter solstice for 12 weeks. So it ends right before the spring equinox, using the idea of the winter spiral of going within, right? That tunnel, that spiral tunnel into our, deepest depths of our souls, and really tapping into that area that we're not comfortable swimming in the depths of our souls that we think we're going to drown, and actually allowing ourselves to drown, really fully committed to that, and then coming out of it right around the spring equinox, so that there is a bit of clarity, understanding, around the next steps and how to assert a sense of not necessarily control, but awareness of ourselves. Right? Again, going back to like attracts like. So during this program, these 12 weeks, we definitely do kundalini kriyas, and they range in spans, but basically by the end you have completed 180 days of holding a kundalini kriya. In addition to that, I work on teaching the understanding of your dosha, your Ayurvedic dosha, so that you have a better understanding of what are your body's mechanism, what we should be consuming, and what not necessarily what we shouldn't consume, but what we need to limit and control, because it activates certain things within our bodies that sometimes is not the best, right? Especially, for example, as I mentioned before, when you're working with the liver and you're working around rage, the liver is the anger, it's a fire element. So you don't want to overeat fiery stuff. That includes like ginger, cinnamon, cayenne, things of that nature. You need to actually do the opposite. But it also depends on where are you in that chart, in the sense of, is it over or underactive? So we talked through that. There's meditation to really open up the ether and our, experience of tapping into our higher selves. There at times could be ceremony around hape. Doesn't always happen. It's more of a call to see what happens. You get one-on-one sessions with me on really looking at your intentions and how they are evolving through this process. Because oftentimes I'll have people who in their intent is to heal the mother wound, and I'll ask them, well, what does that mean for you? Right? Because it's so easy to say heal inner child anger, or heal the mother wound, or heal the paternal line. And I'm like, okay, that's very surface for me. So I need you to go a little bit deeper. What does that look like? Give me a singular word of an emotion of really what you're trying to heal. And then from there, that unravels into layers of understanding how it's being replicated in our day-to-day life, from our work, our interaction with friends, family, loved ones, etc., and giving them a better retrospect on how they need to kind of assert certain levels of boundaries, and in even how they treat themselves, the conversations, the words that we're using when we're talking to ourselves. So I kind of track that from start to finish to see how that is evolving. And then there's also one-on-ones. If they're in the nearby area, in the sense of the tri-state area, they get one-on-one in-person sessions with me as well. If it feels called to have like a womb healing session with my remote participants, they'll get it too, but it is altered a little bit differently because obviously I'm not there. And then there's a sisterhood. There's a sense of sisterhood because this community is open, and I encourage that they team up with each other so that throughout the program, right? Because they only meet with me once a week for the live session, aside from like the one-on-one personal ones, but they're expected to hold the meditations and the practice throughout the rest of the week. And so I encourage them to meet up, because I create a group chat for everyone with others to do it. So set the time, just and get into a rotation. So it's really beautiful to see sometimes when there's a collective and seeing how certain people start off together, and by the end they're doing it with another set of group of women. And what is so beautiful about that is the relationship that develops, that evolves,
Yeah.
because it really creates a sense of sisterhood, even if they're across different states or across different continents, so to speak. And I think that we as a community, we need that. We're lacking that stronghold of understanding that it doesn't matter if you are 20, 30, 40, 50, there's a commonality, right? The
Mhm.
emotion is the commonality. Now, how you show up, and also you end up creating, you become each other's accountability partner, right?
Mhm.
Because you didn't show up to do the meditation, or you're creating these sorts of conversation, but it's just to create that sense of wisdom sharing. Because just as much as a wise woman who is in her 50, 60 years can learn, and oftentimes they tend to forget their maidenhood because they're
Mhm.
so much into their wise woman, right? And I feel that at times they need to learn that. They need to re tap into their maidenness. And the same applies for the maiden who is about to or interested in walking into her mother stage. And mother doesn't necessarily look like you need to birth a child. It could be any sense of mother, birthing a business, birthing a relationship, calling in your divine soul partner. So as you walk into these different stages, when you have women of all sorts of ages in different stages, it creates this constant sharing and awakening within themselves. And
Mhm.
it is truthfully how the Triple Moon Goddess Retreat got created.
Mhm.
In the amplification or the desire to amplify that experience and that sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. What are you gonna say, Ellie?
Oh, I was just gonna say that it is, I can attest for just the beautiful energy that your work and your, aura pulls in. And that is the beauty about being in containers with a group. And I would say specifically with healers such as yourself, Shanti, because the work that's coming up is like you manage the dynamics of a group so effortlessly and beautifully, and so really allowing for everybody to feel seen, heard, accepted, loved, non-judgment. And that is just who I think you call in energetically. And so I know in our retreat, it was from ages 24 to 48, and women all ranges. See, each person was there for you for a different reason. And I would only imagine that that naturally and organically happens in the shadow container as
Mhm.
well. I want to open it up. I know you do a lot of women circles work as well. Share some of that stuff.
So yeah, so I partnered with Stephanie, who is the other co-facilitator for the Triple Moon Goddess, and we do womb wisdom activation. It is
Mm.
a very beautiful experience of kind of a snippet of what takes place on the retreat, but it's really an opportunity for trust to be built. And it's very amazing to see how women have been receptive, women that I've never met, never interacted with, receptive to the offering of releasing and receiving, because that's what ends up happening, right? And it's always beautiful when I get one or two participants that says, "No, I have a great relationship with my womb," and I'm like, "If you're here, because I can tell you, if you were called or brought here by a friend, there is something that you needed to learn." And so afterwards, when we do our integration, it is always really beautiful to hear them like, "Wow, maybe I really didn't have that relationship with my womb the way that I thought I needed," or this unlocked another layer to it. And it's again, it's re-emphasizing that there are layers to relationship building. There's an evolution, right, that always happens that we need to allow to happen as well. And so where we host it on the new moon and on the full moon. And we do it in New York and Long Island City, and we also do it in Montclair at the moment. And yeah, we have one coming up soon in Long Island City on November 2nd. So it's always very amazing because we can plan it to work a certain way, and either the day before or the day of, something always shifts. And it's very interesting to see the dynamics of our how we work, because we'll share, we go very much from either myself leading or Stephanie leading, or the both of us like equally sharing the flow. In addition to that, I began another circle, which is called the lunar womb circle.
Mhm.
And this is an opportunity to really teach women again about taking autonomy over their bodies and becoming their very own physician, so to speak. So in an effort to kind of like promote that and to teach that, the lunar womb circle is a yoni steaming virtual circle where we do tap into the emotional connections to elements. They sort of gear the topic or the theme of the meditation, and through somatic breath work and things of that nature, we're going to be traveling on understanding how to kind of like release as we're yoni steaming, but then also learn the art of yoni steaming and the benefits of the herbs and how these herbs can work from, and these are simple herbs, things that you can potentially have in your cupboard, and how they have multiple properties to really not only heal like a cough, but also like your yeast infection. Because oftentimes we don't think about that. Like I was just telling a girlfriend earlier today, hey, because she was telling me she has a UTI. And I go, so do you have corn in your house? She goes, yeah, why do I need corn? I go, when you peel back the corn, the little hairs that we're always like, eek about. I was like, that's actually called corn silk. Take some of that, put it in a boil it, and drink that. That's going to help your kidney and that's going to help your UTI. And I was like, and that's just something that's in your fridge. You didn't think about that, huh? Did you? She goes, nope. And I go, there you go. So it's like little things like that that oftentimes we don't think about. And why?
Yeah.
Because at the same time, we're not taught, we're not given that information. And I just want to share it. Like, I genuinely want to share this information with women so that they can feel stronger in knowing and reading their bodies. Your period, your menstrual cycle is literally a blueprint of everything that's going on in your body. And so if you learn to read it, like if you stared at your blood long enough, it will tell you, guess what, girl, you shouldn't have had that last cocktail the other day. Or, hey, that person that you kind of got freaky with it shouldn't have been a person you should have done something with, down to the products that we use, right? I try to really inform women that we have to be mindful of if we're using pads, what kind of pads we should be conscious about. If we're using tampons or even the cup, there's different methods and to each his own, but we have to do the due diligence of doing the research for it. And unless you do that, you'll never really know. And then even down to birth control. Listen, if you want to be on birth control, amen to you, but understand also the long-term effects, which oftentimes are not talked about. So the circle is to allow women that space to have these conversations, to share knowledge while at the same time healing our bodies.
How often do you do the womb circle, the digital, the yoni steam? What is that?
So that one is monthly and it alternates.
Okay.
It actually meets on either the full moon or on the new moon. So the next one would be in November, which would be on the full moon. And they'll alternate, and the participants receive a lunar womb box with all the materials that they need
Gorgeous.
for the steaming and to create an altar, to really kind of bring in that energy that they're calling in or releasing, with additional, information that they'll need in regards to like the herbs and, the energy that we're going to be working on.
I love it. And we're going to link all of these because I think it's really great. You have these, three really beautiful avenues for women, like to just trust, self-trust, body autonomy, just some opening up that love or connection or awareness for some people. Like you said, people go their entire lifetimes never looking at their yoni and a yoni steam would seem like so far out of the realms for a lot of people, and there's such a beautiful through line to the way we feel about ourselves, the way we live and move in the world when we are connected to ourselves. And like you said, there are so many ways that many women already are and they can, but there's always more layers of just acceptance and seeing yourself and to peel back. And I think especially as women, we are biologically created with this beautiful creative portal for so much, for creativity. Everyone is creative, but women, we are creative for just pure pleasure and joy and creative power.
Mhm.
So I really, really love that. So we're going to link the lunar womb circle. If anyone listening is like, I want to get on the Yoni steam train, I want to know it, I want to be connected to my crystal palace of power and love and beauty and all of it. That happens monthly. Also, the Womb Alchemy, which is your 12-week program, which I really love, and I can't wait to just read more about it. I love Kundalini Yoga and girl, 180 days of a Kriya. That's building some real serious freaking power right there. Because if you can
Yeah.
sustain a 40-day sadhana or a Kriya, I mean, but 180 days. And I love
Mhm.
that you talk about the sisterhood, the accountability of it, and also the womb wisdom that you're doing with Stephanie on the new and the full moon. So I just wanted to shout those back because they're all just more ways and different access points and depths that you offer to allow women to know themselves more and to trust themselves more. At the end of the day, it always comes back to that. And we have all of these physical manifestations of how that represents itself, but it's all connected.
It is.
I had to share. I mean, I still have you in my human design. I can't remember what exactly you just said, but your most important gift is sharing your take on the facts of life. So I'm like, you're so in that energy. It's this power is not about seeing things that are logical. It's about seeing things in a way that logic and science can't yet explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's at Aquarius rising too.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I also think for anyone who's listening that feels really curious about getting to know you and what you do and maybe experiencing something that you offer, I think what I pick up anyways is, thinking about the 1-3 of it. And I think it really comes through. Like what I know about the one lines is that you really get your confidence from understanding it's not this BS your way through life and like read the how to for dummies book, which also cool. Like I'm a manifesting generator. I need to pick and choose, like we all are meant to operate differently. But I think that's something that especially in these very tender spaces of deep, deep shadow excavation and shadow work and also connecting to your womb, whether it's physical or the emotional and the energetics of it. I think that what comes really clearly across is that you by nature, but also just need to or have that thirst for knowledge and understanding things so deeply before you can, and then layering in the embodied experience that you allow yourself to go through time and again. I think that's a really strong thing to what Ali has said a couple times already is feeling really held. And that can look a lot of different ways. But I think for something so tender, it's really, really almost necessary for a lot of people to be able to trust that someone has the logical and the intellectual understanding of what they're doing and the embodied lived experience too. So really, really amazing.
Thank you.
But before we kind of start to wind down, I think we wanted to get into some other questions just to start closing us out that we ask all of our guests and always get some really great responses. So, what is a quote or mantra that resonates deeply with you?
That's a hard one. I guess the phrase that, and then it's an interesting one because I think I've already stated it in our conversation, but I'm also thinking about like how far back I've been saying it to myself. And so it feels more like as I've gotten older and I, obviously continue to get older, it feels more and more true is I live to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. I used to use that, like I would put that phrase in my social media. I remember because I can go back to like, before Facebook was even around. And that was like my little phrase. Like I remember even on Napster, if anyone no me not what was it? I think Mi Gente or whatever. What are those like old school where everyone was friends with Tom. That was like
I mean, do you get uncomfortable, Shanti?
I do. Like I push
Okay.
myself. Yeah, like I have to push myself like and it's with little things, down to like even getting dressed in the day because, there's moments where it's like, wait, does this really even, does this, you're debating between whether or not does this look good? Is it fashionable? Does it make sense? Am I wearing too many patterns? To am I looking age appropriate, or am I looking not, or you know what I mean? So it's testing things out, right? It's constantly testing things out and being okay with people making comments, right? Like even if even if they don't mean to be mean about it, but just being okay with it, right? Because you could take it any which way. So yeah, so like from that to like, getting up and dancing or going out to dinner by yourself. I think we often don't think about those things, or trying something new. All of a sudden now I want to go try, like honestly, I've said this now to two people that I'm going to learn to do is this spring I'm gonna learn how to golf. I've never in my life thought I would ever want to learn golf. To me, it's like the boringest game ever. I have the worst hand-eye coordination. Baseball and I never worked out, but I'm gonna try my luck at golf.
Yeah.
I
Or
love
the,
it.
so it's willing to test myself, and I think I really began to test myself when I started traveling alone. And you have to rely on your wits to not only pay attention to your surroundings, but make friends and kind of explore things. Or even when you go to meet friends that live in different countries, sometimes things don't work out and you gotta like be quick on your feet and kind of like figure things out, right? And that's happened to me as well. So yeah, so I oftentimes do put myself in uncomfortable situations, and I have found the most that I am most comfortable in those things, because when things are stagnant and too like, well, okay, I can expect what's gonna happen, I'm looking at it like, okay, I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
There's no downloads. There's just something that doesn't happen. There's a movement. And so for creation, for me, it's like I got to step out of my comfort zone and do things. Like another perfect one, I think it was on 4th of July, a girlfriend of mine dared me to go up to a guy and ask and exchange numbers. I've never done that in my life. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I did, and it didn't pan out to anything, but I didn't care. But it was just the ability to just have done it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, more often than none, I do challenge myself with things.
Yeah.
Because you got to see where your strength. I mean, the worst that could ever happen to anything is a no, right?
Yep.
Um, so
Yeah. I think when you are someone who lives to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, you get really, really sharp on what is the right kind of discomfort and what's the discomfort that you no longer settle for in your life. And that's like really, really honing everything that you do in so many ways and like guiding the way, right? Like if you're the one that runs into the fire, just put out the fires, right? Like you've got to be super comfortable because in that space, I really love that. Shanti, is there a book or a podcast that you've had that has had a really significant impact on your life?
Oh yeah, there's definitely one, and I always quote this book. Like I always reference it, especially when people ask me about my spiritual path. It is a book written by Dr. Morena Vega. She wrote the book The Altar of My Soul. And it is her journey of her going, of being initiated into Lucume in Cuba while getting her doctorate degree. And she is the founder of a nonprofit here in New York in Harlem, the cultural. I can't, I don't want to butcher it, but I know it's CCDI, and it's based on the nature of the culture and the practice of the spirituality and bringing that to the forefront through art, through dance, through books, through all these mediums. And yeah, that was the first book that actually opened my eyes into wanting to really understand the spiritual practice, and also that gave me I guess I want to say, like, gave me the courage to say, screw it, I want to learn this. And this was back in college. This was about my senior year. But even though like it gave me the courage enough to deep dive to practice or to begin to understand it. Whether or not I shared it with the world was a different story. But that was the initial moment that I said, this is it. Like in the back of my mind, I thought I was crazy. I thought that maybe I was gothic or into you know what I mean? Like I was going to, and all those Christian ideologies came into head where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go to hell because I'm a devil worshiper and all this other stuff. And it was the moment for me where it was okay to say, no, this is not devil worship. This is not going to send me to some unknown fire pit of whatever.
Yeah.
This is a practice that is of my people, has always been in my blood. Um, And that just piqued curiosity. And because of it, I started to ask family questions and then realized that I have great uncles that practice it. And I have distinct cousins, so to speak, that no one speaks to, but that still practice it and in their own ways. And so in learning that, I was just like, oh, so then I am not that far removed. Like this is me, and it's okay. So it was the book that began my journey, and I will forever be grateful for that book.
Well, I'm gonna look that up. And I wonder if there was anything in the author that you saw of yourself being someone going after her doctorate at the same time as pursuing her own spiritual path and lineage and
Yeah, it
yeah.
was because she talks about the struggle, like, and especially looking at it from an academia perspective, right? Because
Yeah.
I at that moment I was like, oh, I do. If I was to pull out my accolades, I do have two master's degree, and I
Hmm.
was thinking about going to law school. It was between law school, getting my PhD. So having that, that academia mind that it was very struggling. Like, well, wait a minute, this is on spirituality, and the spirituality, it's kind of interesting because it doesn't adhere to a real science of any sort. It's like, so many layers to it. But I do appreciate the academia because it gave me my logic sense, right? The ability to cycle break down things to the minute, where it's like, oh, the deconstruction. But yeah, I definitely did. And she was definitely has been someone that I've admired, especially in the spiritual practice of this community, particularly because she was the first woman and she represented the US, so to speak, when there was a congregation coming together, bridging leaders from Nigeria, leaders from Brazil and Kundumble, like bringing all the diaspora practices and reconnecting to its mother root of the Yoruba people. She sat on that council to begin bridging that relationship so that there's a better understanding of the similarities and the differences, but understanding and giving respect to the differences because the differences were influenced by the diaspora, right? By the slave trade. So having and knowing that, and me, when I tell you I deep dive, I once again, because I pulled up when she mentions the doctor and the document that came from that congression meeting. I Googled it and I started reading it. Like, yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I need to know.
Yeah.
So I give her much respect, even though our practices are not necessarily similar, because I do practice it very closely to how it is practiced in Yoruba back in Nigeria, from where my elders hail from. But there's still a massive respect because of the space that she holds, and then now having created this community where it is now a lot more respected and embraced within the very neighborhood that wasn't that far from where I grew up. And it's embracement in all senses. Yeah, I definitely respect her for it. The work that she currently and still does in the community, both on a social activism and then also on a cultural community of education. So yeah,
I love
I highly
that.
recommend that book.
Yeah, I'm excited to add it to my ever-growing list of books to read. But yeah, and I also think that for me personally, and I think I pick up on that with you too, I think there's something about that logical thirst for knowledge. And for me, I love a lot of historical. I love to go deep down the rabbit holes of different cultures and through history. And I often find that having that deeper, maybe more intellectual curiosity and understanding, even when it comes to spirituality, almost grounds what I do believe as well, because it takes away the other conditioning or the mass of what I was taught to
Hmm.
believe blindly, right? Faith is blind. Well, also, there are many layers for people with different cultural backgrounds as well, because our sense of spirituality and faith has been colonized and changed over time and has blended. And so sometimes the intellectual aspect, for me anyways, almost just enhances the experience a lot of times. So I really love hearing that. And I want to know We ask everyone our self-love check-in. Shanti, what does self-love mean to you?
Self-love means knowing yourself well enough to say no and being okay with the other parties not embracing or accepting it. So knowing that boundary, right? Because if you're not able to honor when your body is saying no to something, and it could be everything from picking up the phone when it rings and engaging in a conversation with anyone, even including family, to going somewhere, right? Engaging with people. When you can't honor that, you don't show up in your most authentic self. And so you're once again living in a state of cycle of people pleasing for the sake of. And it just, if anything, you're now going several steps back as opposed to forward. So the more you're able to recognize where no lives in your body and listening to the no and exercising that no, the more the world can embrace you for who you are. And so that's the biggest gift you can give yourself.
Yeah. And you start to attract, it's that circling back like attracts like. And I think you were talking about that earlier. Ah, so
Mm.
beautiful. Where can people find you and what do you feel called left to share with the Karmic Mirror community?
Sure. I still do see clients on a one-on-one basis if anyone wants to deep dive and do in-depth womb healing work. I see clients here in New York in Yonkers as well as in Montclair, well, actually Verona, New Jersey. So you can easily reach out to me either via my website, wombshanti.com, or through Instagram. I'm very respectful of people and their time. And I honor when people reach out so much that I respond like the lag time is maybe 20 minutes from from when I
I
first.
can attest to that. I feel there are things, Shanti's doing this retreat and she opened up her own personal book to do womb massages there. And just thinking, how do you have the energy to do this? And all I can go back to is you had made a comment initially. It's just that inner knowing of you are as a generator in that juicy spot of what lights you up. And I think that's where you draw that energy and motivation from in many ways. And I would just really encourage, I think sometimes in these spaces, unfortunately, the work you do isn't as mainstream, right? And we've
No.
talked about all of that. And I share your work all the time. And sometimes when people are like, well, what does that mean or what happens? And I think for anyone just feeling curious, reach out, have the conversation because that is the beauty in this healing and the work is that what Shanti you bring is that customized to each person and their path and what they're looking to do. And we've talked about all of these different modalities, gifts, and all of these offerings that you provide to people. And I love healers like you, and I'm very biased because I love you and I've worked with you, but I think people like you are so needed in this world for many reasons, and also because you have all of these tools at your disposal to provide to your clients. And so that is my big shout out that if any of this stuff just starts to resonate with you, just shoot her a DM, schedule a session with her to talk a little bit through that.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. I don't even charge more often than none. I don't charge for consultations just to because I just want to share the information. I want you to feel comfortable and confident in on what is about to happen. I walk you through that, but also in what is going to happen. And oftentimes, there are folks that come in and they're like, "Oh, are you going to have like am I going to have a reading?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it is a possibility. That is what your guides are going to let me know if they need or feel that this is the right time to have that conversation because there's also a balance, right? I might get a download of what I need to tell you, but they may also be telling me you're not ready to hear it. You're not going to be receptive to understanding what I'm about to say, let alone accept it. So there's a thin line between that. But yeah, I encourage anyone to just reach out, ask questions. Like I said, I am honored with every question that I receive, and I provide you with as much of it as I can, because there is a level of it I don't want to say that it's a surprise, but it's intuitive. And so I can only plan but so much of what that session is going to look like, and that experience. It really is something that you have to experience for yourself.
Yeah. So if this was a 5-star rating, I'd give you a zillion times rating,
Uh,
my love.
well,
Thank
I
you.
love you too.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Please, if you feel called, go check Shanti out, and just what a gift you are to this world. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you, ladies, for having me on your beautiful podcast.
Thank you.
I know that the work that you're doing is still amazing too, because you're holding space for the conversation. And sometimes that in and of itself is medicine, knowing that, for the other person, the listener who's listening, to know that they're not the only one experiencing it, or the only ones that are thinking it, or the only ones feeling it. So to hear others going through that experience and that journey sometimes is what sparks the interest and gives the courage for them to finally take the leap to begin the journey of what is called reclaiming yourself. So thank you.
Thanks, Shanti.
Thanks for tuning in. If you resonate with today's conversation, connect with us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and send us a message.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're loving Karmic Mirror, we'd appreciate a glowing review or share with someone who could benefit.
As we close, remember, life is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How are you honoring your unique path? Stay curious and always be kind to yourself. Until next time on Karmic Mirror.